What if success wasn't measured only by transcripts, test scores, or college acceptance letters, but by the kind of adult your child becomes 20 years from now? What if the real goal of homeschooling wasn't simply getting your child to graduation day, but raising the kind of man or woman who remains faithful when no one is watching? What if success wasn't measured only by transcripts, test scores, or college acceptance letters, but by the kind of adult your child becomes 20 years from now? Because eventually, every homeschool reveals what it has truly been building, not merely through academics, but through the habits, convictions, and direction a young adult carries into life. Biblical homeschooling is not ultimately measured by grades, achievements, or early academic success. It is measured by formation. When a child graduates from a biblical homeschool, you should be able to see the fruit: ordered thinking, governed behavior, clarity about marriage and work, respect for authority, emotional steadiness, and confidence rooted in truth. Scripture does not leave the outcomes of maturity vague. And throughout history, faithful Christian voices have continued pointing families toward biblical manhood, womanhood, responsibility, and obedience to God. The goal is not simply to raise educated children. The goal is to raise faithful adults. Adults who can think clearly, adults who can govern themselves, adults who can withstand cultural pressure, adults who know how to live under God's authority in every area of life. So in this video, I want to walk through 8 outcomes biblical homeschooling aims to produce, and what those outcomes actually look like in adulthood. Not in theory, not in childhood alone, but in real life after graduation, when your child begins making decisions all on their own. This became very personal for our family over the years. When my husband and I first started homeschooling, one of the things we really wanted was to prepare our children for adult life responsibly. We wanted them to understand stewardship, work, initiative, and responsibility. We taught them finances early. That was a big thing. We used chore charts. We paid them weekly. We taught them to divide their money into the Dave Ramsey categories: give, save, and spend. We took the Ramsey courses together as a family. We encouraged our children to create products, pursue ideas, and develop skills around the things they loved. And looking back now, we can see the fruit of that formation. Both handle money better than I do. Our children grew up pursuing meaningful work they genuinely enjoy. My son is currently a full-time photographer, videographer, and social media manager. He lives on his own and has a healthy savings account and retirement plan at the age of 28. He's ready for the day he finds his future wife. Hopefully, she's gone through the Dave Ramsey courses too. My daughter is a wife now, a mother, a homemaker, and what I jokingly call a garden scientist, while also finishing her biology degree. She loves building a beautiful home life, growing things, learning constantly, and serving her family well. She even married someone who also went through the Dave Ramsey courses as a homeschool child in a completely different part of the US. They both manage money in complete unity. That's a huge plus for a young married couple. But there was another goal we had that honestly took much longer for us to understand. We desperately wanted our children to love reading. We tried so many things while they were growing up. And if I'm honest, for years, we didn't really see the evidence that either of them truly loved reading the way we imagined they would. But now, late in their 20s, they both genuinely enjoy reading of their interests. And one of the things I eventually realized is this: children often become what is modeled consistently in the home. The truth is, my husband and I read constantly for work. But we were never naturally avid recreational readers ourselves, and in many ways, our children reflected that without us even knowing. This realization humbled me. Another goal I had for them was that I wanted them to serve as foreign missionaries like my husband and I did for 10 years as a young married couple. But they never pursued it long term, even though we read all the missionary stories and went on short-term mission trips when they were children. Biblical homeschooling teaches you very quickly that formation is deeper than curriculum. Children absorb habits, culture, priorities, attitudes, rhythms, and examples over many years of time. And that's why the outcomes matter so much. Not because we're trying to create perfect children, but because we're shaping the direction of an entire life. One of the clearest outcomes of biblical homeschooling is a self-governed individual. This young adult demonstrates self-control, humility, diligence, and responsibility. Their behavior is not controlled merely by rules, consequences, or supervision. It is guided by personal conviction, and this changes everything. You begin to see steadiness instead of impulsiveness, respect instead of entitlement, responsibility instead of excuse-making. They follow through on their commitments. They speak respectfully to parents, employees, community leaders, and business owners. They contribute rather than simply consume. And when difficulties arise, they do not collapse emotionally every time life becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because biblical homeschooling is not merely training information into the mind, like many of us do on a day-to-day basis. It is training habits into the life. Over time, children learn that freedom is connected to responsibility. Discipline produces stability, and character matters more than image. And eventually, those habits become visible in adulthood. Another outcome of biblical homeschooling is a mind trained to think in terms of truth. We live in a culture that teaches children to react emotionally before they think carefully. But biblical homeschooling trains children to slow down, reason clearly, and evaluate ideas through the lens of Scripture. This type of young adult understands that ideas have consequences. They ask thoughtful questions. They discern media content carefully. They recognize and despite foolishness and frivolity. They are not easily swept away by trends or peer pressure. And perhaps most importantly, their confidence comes from personal accomplishment, not the praise of other people. They do not need to dominate every conversation. They do not need approval from the crowd. Their thinking is anchored. Biblical homeschooling helps children understand that truth is not invented by culture or emotion. Truth comes from God. And when children are trained to reason from truth consistently over many years, they become adults who can stand firm on what they believe. Another outcome of biblical homeschooling also produces clarity of purpose. Many young adults today drift through life because they were taught to prioritize self-expression over responsibility. But biblical homeschooling teaches children that life has meaning, order, and purpose under God. This young adult begins thinking long-term. They understand that decisions today affect tomorrow. They think about stewardship, family, work, service, and legacy. They're not controlled by impulse or immediate gratification. Their goals are not built entirely around comfort, status, or personal fulfillment. Instead, they begin asking, what responsibilities has God given me? How can I faithfully serve others? What kind of life honors truth? This kind of questioning creates stability because when purpose is rooted in truth instead of emotion, direction becomes much clearer. Now let's talk about another outcome that's real popular: dating and marriage. A mature biblical homeschool graduate approaches relationships with sobriety and intentionality. They understand that dating is not for entertainment or personal pleasure, and marriage is not for personal fulfillment. They also think that love isn't merely an emotional intensity. Instead, they believe that relationships are approached with patience, accountability, wisdom, and commitment. This young adult values faithfulness over excitement, character over charm, stability over impulse. They understand that marriage is a covenant designed by God, not simply a personal lifestyle accessory. And because they have been trained to think long term, they approach relationships carefully rather than casually. This often produces young men and women who are emotionally steadier, more discerning, and less vulnerable to cultural confusion surrounding relationships, marriage, and identity. One of the next outcomes of biblical homeschooling is readiness for independence without rebellion. Many young adults today, as you know, associate independence with separation from authority. Finally, I get to move out of my parents' house and live the way I want. But biblical homeschooling teaches children that maturity involves learning to carry responsibility willingly. So when the biblical homeschool educated young adult leaves home, it is not driven by resentment, hostility, or escape. It's approached with preparation. They understand how to manage responsibilities. They work, contribute, communicate respectfully. They honor their parents, even while stepping into adulthood. Their independence is rooted in stewardship, not autonomy. And this produces something increasingly rare: young adults who are capable of functioning responsibly in the real world without needing constant rescue. That's the kind of adult I want to raise. Now let's talk about work and calling. Biblical homeschooling also develops a strong theology of work. This young adult understands that work is not merely about money, status, or self-expression. Work is a part of being productive and serving others in everything they do. They value diligence, excellence, respect for authority, and structure. They understand how to contribute to a team. And because they have learned discipline over many years, they often bring steadiness and reliability into the workplace. They show up prepared, they follow through, they take initiative without entitlement. And when leadership opportunities arise, they are prepared to serve, not simply demand influence. Their understanding of success is different. Success is measured by faithfulness, stewardship, contribution, and obedience to God, not for mere public recognition. Another outcome of biblical homeschooling is graduates who also possess a stable faith. And this kind of faith does not depend upon cultural approval. This does not mean fear of the world. It does not mean isolation. And it does not mean hostility toward people who disagree. Instead, it produces thoughtful cultural engagement. This young adult understands how to live in the culture without being ruled by it. They can discern ideas carefully. They can recognize error without panic. They can engage difficult conversations thoughtfully. And because their identity is rooted in truth rather than social approval, they are less vulnerable to cultural drift. Their posture becomes confident, not arrogant, peaceful, not passive, conviction, meaning they have conviction and they're not hostile. And in today's world, that kind of steadiness is becoming increasingly uncommon. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room: intellectual and emotional maturity. This is often so neglected by all homeschoolers. Biblical homeschooling aims to produce a well-ordered inner life. This type of young adult learns to think before reacting. They learn reflection, self-government, humility, and wisdom. They understand that maturity involves both discipline of the mind and stability of the heart, and this becomes visible during adversity. When corrected, they can listen. When challenged, they can endure. When disappointed, they do not collapse. They communicate respectfully. They recover from hardship. They continue growing instead of becoming bitter. They know how to handle their problems. This kind of maturity does not happen accidentally. It is formed slowly through years of biblical instruction, accountability, building habits, and a God-centered life. In conclusion, all these 8 outcomes do not appear overnight, and they are not produced by curriculum alone. They are the result of years of formation, habits shaped, thinking trained, character tested, and truth practiced consistently over time. The question is not simply, what curriculum do we use? The deeper question is, who is this child becoming? Because in biblical homeschooling, graduation is not merely the completion of academics, it is the beginning of adulthood. And wouldn't you want your child to pass on maturity and wisdom and responsibility and live under God's authority? I know I do. And I made sure every single day I homeschooled that I was doing everything I could to get them there. If these are the outcomes you want for your children, then the way you homeschool matters. Formation does not happen by accident. It does not happen by borrowing the culture's goals. So what you have to do is stay anchored. Teach your children, spend time with them, train them with patience and understanding. Measure success by the kind of adults your children are becoming. If you want help building a homeschool grounded in biblical principles like the way my husband and I did, click the link below in the description box and get my free resource called Understanding Biblical Principles. It will definitely help you begin building a homeschool ordered that lasts into the future. If you've been enjoying these videos and you want more conversations about biblical homeschooling, biblical worldview, and raising children who know how to think clearly and walk with God, make sure you subscribe. And if this video encourages you, give it a like because it helps more homeschool families like you find biblical encouragement and direction. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.